So we'll do small kirtan and then we will start with the session, Prabhuji. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Yamuna Tira Vanachari, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Krishna Balaram Jaya, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram Jaya, Vrindavan Dham, Krishna Balaram Jaya, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram Jaya, Vrindavan Dham, Jaya Jaya Radhe, Jaya Jaya Syam, Jaya Jaya Sri Vrindavan Dham, Jaya Jaya Radhe, Jaya Jaya Syam, Jaya Jaya Sri Vrindavana Dham. Jaya Jaya Radhe, Jaya Jaya Shyam. Jaya Jaya Sri Vrindavana Dham. Krishna Balaram Jaya, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram Jaya Vrindavana Dham. Krishna Balaram Jaya, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram Jaya Vrindavana Dham. Krishna Balaram Jaya, Krishna Balaram, Krishna Balaram Jaya Vrindavana Dham. श्री प्रभुपाद की जय, गुरु महाराज की जय. ओम अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनाशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. नमः ओम विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामिनिति नामिने. नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणि निर्विशेषशून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणि. जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद. हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम
हरे राम 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 हरे हरे.
ओम नमः भगवते वासुदेवाय. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय. I'm sharing my screen, Prabhuji. Can everyone see this?
Yes, Prabhuji. Yeah, we can see it.
So, as I was actually asked, or I had to continue with the 13th chapter, first canto. I have taken this service, and I'm very glad to everyone, and especially to Praveen Prabhuji and Lilananda Prabhuji, who has assigned me this service. So this chapter, 13th chapter of first canto, actually talks about basically 5 different things in this one. It is kind of little big chapter, and with the 60 text, and these 60 text talks about 5 different things. The first one is, it talks about who is Vidura. It doesn't actually exactly talk about Vidura, but we can actually summarize, and as a continuation to 12th chapter, we can discuss a little bit on who is Vidura, because it is very important. This whole chapter revolves around Vidura's instructions to Dhritarashtra. So first we will talk about who is Vidura, and is he qualified for a preacher or not, because he in fact did preaching to Dhritarashtra in this chapter. So we will try to understand whether he is qualified to be a preacher despite of taking birth in a Sudra's womb. And then we will talk about, this chapter talks about Vidura's instructions to Dhritarashtra, and how Dhritarashtra, being so sinful, encouraging all his sons to perform war in Kurukshetra, how is he qualified to receive Vidura's instructions? And then we are going to discuss about Maharaj Yudhishthir's compassion towards Dhritarashtra, because after listening to Vidura, Dhritarashtra leaves the kingdom and goes in exile to Himalayas, southern part of Himalayas. So Yudhishthir, not knowing that, he first tries to find Dhritarashtra in the kingdom, and then when he could not find him in the palace, he is like very bewildered, and he kind of becomes so compassionate. So the third topic that we are going to discuss today is Yudhishthir's compassion towards his ill-charactered uncle, and then Narada's instructions to Sanjaya and Yudhishthira, because Sanjaya is a personal assistant of Dhritarashtra, and Yudhishthira is like kind of son to Dhritarashtra, right? So these two people are very much bewildered when Dhritarashtra leaves the kingdom. So Narada comes to pacify them, both Dhritarashtra as well, Yudhishthira as well as Sanjay. And then this fourth topic is Narada's instructions, and the last extraction from this is Yudhishthira getting liberation. We will see, Dhritarashtra getting liberation. We'll see how Dhritarashtra is also qualified to get liberation. So in fact, Dhritarashtra, if we understand, is not at all qualified because of so much of ill personified behavior, and playing lot of and not checking the whatever bad things that happened to Draupadi in that Mayasava, right? So we will see how Dhritarashtra is qualified to receive Vidura's instructions, and how Dhritarashtra got liberated. So these are the 5 extractions from this chapter, which has 60 texts, right? So what I have done is I have kind of tried to gather only those important texts from this, because 60 texts in 1 hour is definitely going to be very difficult. So what I've done is I just tried to extract those important texts from this, from which we can actually extract these five essence, right? So first to talk about Vidura, Prabhuji, I think I'm audible, right? Or
Yes, Prabhuji, you're clearly audible.
okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Yeah. So actually, if we look at Vidura's past, Vidura is son of Vyasdeva, firstly. And how is he son of Vyasdeva? Because the story goes something like this, right? Shantanu marries Ganga Devi first, and because of some curse that Shantanu and Ganga Devi had to have in the heavenly planets, they come back to Earth to take birth, right? Because of some affair that they had, and Ganga Devi takes birth in the earthly planet, and Ganga Devi and Shantanu, they both get married, and during the marriage, Ganga Devi puts a condition that Shantanu should not say anything in the sense, like he should not check whatever Ganga Devi says, right? So what happens is Ganga Devi gives birth, so Ganga Devi gives birth to eight children. In these eight children, the first seven children, when they were born, she just, the moment she gives birth, she takes the babies and then goes and throws in the running river. So but at the time of marriage, Shantanu wanted to marry Ganga Devi, like that was like his life, as if it was his lifetime goal, right? So what happens is, Shantanu wants to marry Ganga Devi, and Ganga Devi puts a condition that, after marriage, at any given time, Shantanu should never check or stop from what Ganga Devi wanted to do. If at all he does stop her, she's going to leave him at that point in time. Like that, what happens is Shantanu and Ganga Devi gives birth to seven children, and all the children were taken by Ganga Devi and were thrown into water, and they immediately die, right? So again, there is a very big story behind that, why these seven children were thrown into water. There is another big story. But the eighth child, which is like 1/7 part of all these seven other children, is what becomes the Bhishma Dev, right? So the moment the eighth child got given birth, Ganga Devi knows that Shantanu is gonna stop her, but she tries to pretend as if he's gonna leave that baby also. Then Shantanu comes and then checks Ganga Devi, and he could not tolerate. He stops her. Then the moment he stops, Ganga Devi disappears and gives birth to Bhishma Pitamaha, right? So this is the story of Bhishma. Now, cutting the story short, now Bhishma wanted to. Bhishma is never married because he wanted his father to marry Satyavati. Satyavati is another fisher king or whatever you call, like Samanta Raj's daughter, and he marries Satyavati. And when he marries Satyavati, what happens is Satyavati's father doesn't agree, because Shantanu already has a son Bhishma, and Bhishma is technically or legally is gonna become the next king for the for the kingdom, right? So what Satyavati's father asks Bhishma is, you should not become a king in first place, and secondly, there is a possibility that you might beget children and equations might change. So you should not even get married. In fact, they don't ask. Bhishma himself does this promise that I will not even get married to beget any children, so that my descendants or my successors are not going to become king. So that's how Satyavati and Shantanu gives birth to another child called Vichitravirya. Right. So if you look at it, Vichitravirya and Bhishma are brothers. Right. Now Bhishma makes Vichitravirya the king. Now Vichitravirya, he gets married. In fact, there happens another what is it called, that matchmaking ceremony, right? It's called, I don't exactly remember the name of it, what it is called, but
It is
Vichitra
called
Swayamvara.
Swayamvar.
Swayamvaram, correct, yeah. So he underwent the Swayamvaram with Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. These are the three daughters, right? Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. What happens with these three is, during Swayamvar, they don't agree to marry Vichitravirya. So then what happens is Bhishma goes and kidnaps, and he challenges, if anyone wants to stop me. Okay. So, but no one stops. So these three were taken by Bhishma to palace, and then they were about to marry these three, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika, with Vichitravirya. That's when Amba says she already had another love affair with another person. So they leave Amba. But Ambika and Ambalika are the two princesses were left, and they now Vichitravirya gets married to these two. Now what happens is Vichitravirya, because of ill health, he actually leaves the body. Now Satyavati is in depression because there is no one to actually take the kingdom now. She requests Bhismadev that can you take hold of the kingdom, entire kingdom. Now, but Bhismadev says no. I have made he's a Mahajan, right? If he makes promise, it's not gonna get broken at any point in time. Any time, space, and circumstance, that's not gonna be broken because he said he has to, as per instructions by the Supreme Lord, Bhishmadev has to set an exam. It has to be an exemplary personality, right? So he says that no, I'm not gonna get married. Neither I'm gonna get married, nor I'm gonna take care of the kingdom. Then what happens is we have kind of solutions for everything, right? So what happens is actually Vyasadev is a kind of a so-called brother for Vichitravirya. How it happens is Parasura Muni actually gives birth to Vyasadev because Parasura Muni, he likes Satyavati. It is another parallel story. So what happens is Parasura Muni goes to Satyavati, and because of her so much beauty, he gets attracted and then tells her that I want to get a child with you. But Satyavati says no, if my father gets to know, it will be a problem. And then what happens is Parasura Muni says, I will give birth to a child from your womb, but you will not lose your virginity. That's how Parasura Muni gives birth to Vyasadev with Satyavati, right? So now Vyasadev, if you look at this way, Vyasadev is a kind of brother to Vichitravirya. So what happens is now the solution comes like this. Now Vichitravirya is no more. Bhishma doesn't want to give birth because he considers himself as, he has to behold the promise that he has made. Now what happens is Vichitravirya is not there. Someone has to give birth to continue the dynasty, right? So now they request Vyasadeva, right? So when they requested Vyasadeva, Vyasadeva comes. In fact, Vyasadeva gives a benediction to Satyavati that after birth, Vyasadeva disappears, and before disappearing, he tells, at any given point in time, you need my help, you call me, I'll come, my dear mother, he says. So Satyavati prays for Vyasadeva, and Vyasadeva comes, Vyasadeva appears. And then she requests, see, here are your brother's wives, good wives, Ambika and Ambalika. Now, to continue this kingdom, you have to give birth to babies from Ambika and Ambalika's homes. Then Vyasadeva says, okay, good, I can give birth. Then what happens is, there are like the Pandu, Dhritarashtra, and Vidura. These three were born out of that, another detoured solution. So to cut I don't want to go into details of Dhritarashtra and, or maybe it's a very small, short story. Let me finish that also. So when Vyasadeva goes to Ambika, actually Vyasadeva is a Muni, right? So what happens is he's not groomed. Even his hair is not properly combed. So he's with Munis. We see him like they were not at all groomed, and then in fact, so to very introvert or conservative princesses or queens, they look very scary. So the moment Vyasadeva enters into the room of Ambika, Ambika closes her eyes out of fear. So what happens is Vyasadeva gives birth to a boy who is Dhritarashtra. Just because Ambika closed her eyes during that union, the boy who took birth is a blind man, who is none other than Dhritarashtra. Now what happens is with Ambalika, what happens is with the moment Vyasadeva enters, Ambalika gets fainted because of the fear and then scare. She gets fainted. That's how Pandu was born. He becomes weak because he was very scared. And finally, and these two children, one is blind and another one is very weak. Panduraj is very weak. So again, Satyavati requests, you have to give birth to another baby karke. She requests Vyasadev. Now this time what happens is Vyasadev agrees, and when Vyasadev enters the room, the queen, I think it's Ambalika. What Ambalika does is she's more gets scared, and what she does is, instead of she going to unite with Vyasadev, she sends her maid servant who is a Sudra. Her name is Sudri. So Vyasadev unites with Sudri and gives birth to Vidura. So I told this entire story to actually set the context of how Vidura was born. In fact, there is another previous birth that Vidura had. I think we are going to discuss about this in one of the texts. Vidura is actually born. He's actually Yamaraj in his previous life, but he actually takes birth as Vidura to a Sudra mother because of another curse by another rishi, right? And one another reason, or this pastime goes because on the instruction of the Supreme Lord, Yamaraj is so busy, handling the ledgers of good deeds and bad deeds of all the living entities, right? So what happens is Yamaraj doesn't have time to actually become a preacher. But if you look at it, the qualities that Yamaraj has actually suits best to be a preacher. But Yamaraj doesn't have time to preach. So what happens is he is on the instruction of Supreme Lord. He takes birth as Vidura. Again, someone has to take birth for some reason, right? That's how he, there is a curse by a Muni, and then that's how Yamaraj. That again, I don't want to go into the details of it. And one of the outcomes of that curse is, Vidura taking birth to Sudri, right? So this is what Vidura. So if we look at Vidura's birth, he is a Sudra, right? By birth, he is not qualified. In fact, a person who is a Sudra. In olden days, he used to be literally, given the very menial kind of works. So thinking of him being a preacher is a long way, right? But as we have heard in many sessions, for one to get to a certain consciousness, it could be goodness, ignorance, goodness, passion, or ignorance. It doesn't just come by birth. There are three things that actually give someone a qualification, right? First is birth, second is association, third is habits. So because of these three things, someone becomes a good or bad person in the society: birth, association, and habits, right? By birth, Vidura is definitely a Sudra, but he has taken birth from Vyasa, so he is a very elevated soul. We will get to an understanding of that during this chapter. So what I'll do is, as we have said the context, I'll go to the most texts which we can actually extract something from it, right? So this actually talks about Vidura's return after listening to Maitreya Muni. So when we here this text 3 and 4 actually elevates Vidura's status further. If we read it, what it says is, when they saw Vidura return to the palace, all the inhabitants, Maharaj Yudhishthir, his younger brothers, Dhritarashtra, Satyaki, Sanjaya, Krupacharya, Kunti, Gandhari, Draupadi, Subhadra, Uttara, Krupi, many other wives of the Kauravas, and other ladies with children, all hurried to him in great delight. It so appeared that they had regained their consciousness after a long period. If you look at it, this last highlighted sentence, it says, it so appeared that they had regained their consciousness after a long period. So it sounds as if they were lifeless when Vidura was not there. When Vidura came back, after his tour, where he actually heard a lot of many things due to the association with Maitreya Muni, right? So if we look at it, they regained the consciousness. Means this is actually kind of trying to emphasize on how great Vidura is. So none were left. All the great kings, queens, uh, everyone actually rushed towards Vidura when he came back from the pilgrimage, right? It says when they saw Vidura, it actually appeared that they actually had regained their consciousness after a long period, right? So if you look at it, in this text, even Dhritarashtra was not spared. Even Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari also came to Vidura, right? Who are in a way envious of Vidura, because one, Vidura has taken birth to Sudri, and two, he has always been on the side of Pandavas, right? So if we technically look at it, Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, these two were supposed to be envious of Vidura, or kind of enemies to Vidura, but still they also felt like regained their consciousness. So such a kind of exalted personality Vidura was, right? Even for that matter, we know that even Krishna, when he went for making sandhi, or um, when he wanted to stop the war, make some kind of compromise between Kauravas and Pandavas, he doesn't stay with Duryodhana's place. He stays with Vidura, and Vidura was so exalted, out after seeing Krishna, he forgets himself, and he wanted to feed something to Krishna. While he was feeding Krishna, instead of giving banana core, he gives banana peels to Krishna, and Krishna happily eats them. Such a kind of exalted devotee Vidura is. So this is the context. Though he has taken birth in Sudra's family, he is a very exalted devotee of the Supreme Lord. And with his qualities and his good character, even Dhritarashtra and Gandhari were inspired to run to him, and could not bear his separation anymore. Right? And this text 10 talks about. Now Yudhishthir receives Vidura. Vidura comes back, and then everyone pays obeisances mutually. Like Vidura pays obeisances to elders like Dhritarashtra and Gandhari, and others pay obeisance. Yudhishthir Maharaj and all the Pandavas, all these younger people, they pay obeisances to Vidura. So there is a mutual exchange of obeisances, and then Vidura takes some rest and has some good. He eats palatable dishes that were offered, and everything happens. And finally, what happens is he is given a nice seat in the royal palace by Yudhishthir. Now the king is Yudhishthir, right? So the war is over, everything is done. Now Yudhishthir is the king, and Yudhishthir gives him a nice, very nice seat because he's a very exalted devotee of Krishna, and he's a now learned scholar because he has learned so many things from Maitreya Muni. Right now, he has given a very royal seat. Now he starts speaking. In fact, Yudhishthir addresses him saying, "My lord." If you read it, he says, "My lord, devotees like you, like your good self, are verily holy places personified. Because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart, you turn all places into places of pilgrimage." And here the translation is important. At the same time, I highlighted certain text. We will come to this highlighted text. If you look at it, first, Yudhishthira Maharaj is addressing Vidura as my lord, right? So usually we are not supposed to address someone as lord unless he is really lord, right? But if you look at here, Vidura is such an exalted devotee, and Yudhishthira Maharaj is seeing a spiritual master in Vidura. And spiritual master, I mean, when we give respect, we must have heard in many sessions by Maharaj and senior devotees in our sampradaya, right? Guru has to be treated with such a respect which we actually give to the Supreme Lord. It is considered that Guru is a transparent glass, or he can be a semi-transparent glass, and see-through semi-transparent glass through which we can actually see the Supreme Lord. So it is said in that morning, one of the kirtans, that Guru Pranam, we have that, right? He gives Divya Chakshudana. So he gives the spiritual vision to see the Lord. So Guru is considered to be the transparent glass, a semi-transparent glass, who when he wants to open and make it transparent, he can do. If he doesn't want, he can close it. So without mercy of Guru, we cannot see the Lord. So to access Lord, it is very, very important that we should be able to see through this semi-transparent glass. So Guru is considered to be the semi-transparent glass between disciple and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Yudhishthira, knowing the value, or the elevated position of Vidura, he is addressing Vidura as my lord. Devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified. This text is very important because at times we hear from many Vaishnavas that they can take darshan of Vrindavan and Mayapur sitting in somewhere in Chicago. Right? They are not even in India, but still they can actually take darshan of dhams, holy places like Chicago, holy places like Mayapur Dham or Vrindavan Dham or Jagannath Puri Kshetra. How does this happen actually? This happens because they were given that spiritual vision by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Likewise, and many times, as we heard in our satsangs, holy place is not a place. Holy place is not just a place where the actual deities are residing. Wherever there are pure devotees, that places are called holy places. That's what Yudhishthira is trying to address over here. Devotees like your good self are verily holy places personified, because you carry the personality of Godhead within your heart. You turn all places into places of pilgrimage. It means that wherever the Supreme Lord is there, that is considered to be the holy place. Now, wherever Vidura is going, he is carrying the Lord in his heart, right? So wherever Vidura is going, wherever he is stepping, that place is automatically getting transformed to a pilgrimage. And let's read through the highlighted text. A pure devotee like Vidura always feels the presence of the Lord everywhere. He sees everything in the potency of the Lord, and the Lord in everything. The holy places all over the earth are meant for purifying the polluted consciousness of a human being by an atmosphere surcharged with the presence of Lord's unalloyed devotees. If anyone visits a holy place, he must search out for. This is also again very, very important purport given by Srila Prabhupada. He says, if anyone visits a holy place, he must search out the pure devotees residing in such holy places. Take lessons from them. Try to apply such instructions in practical life, and thus gradually prepare oneself for the ultimate salvation going back to Godhead. So here the important thing to note is, if anyone visits a holy place, the first thing he must do is to search for pure devotees residing in such holy places. What is the reason behind someone to search for a pure devotee? Because it is said that, right, if you want to go to Vrindavan without the permission, if you, for that matter, not just Vrindavan, even any holy place, Mayapur Dham, Jagannath Puri Dham, or Tirupati Balaji Temple, when we want to go there, we need to take permission, or for that matter, we should get an invitation from the Supreme Lord to go and visit, right? Without Vrinda Devi's permission, we cannot enter into Vrindavan. It doesn't mean that you cannot enter. You can buy a ticket and then go and get into Vrindavan, right? It's absolutely possible. But is it called going to Vrindavan? No, that is the difference. So going to Vrindavan, buying a ticket with all the ego and pride is different, and going to Vrindavan with the permission of Vrinda Devi to get Krishna Bhakti is different, right? So what it means is, it's something like taking a vehicle and going into Vrindavan is not considered to be going into Vrindavan. If you look at the actual purpose of going to Vrindavan is to feel the Supreme Lord's pastimes, right? So when otherwise, Vrindavan is also like any other place, like Hyderabad. So if you're going to Vrindavan and if you're not able to feel the presence of the Supreme Lord and his pastimes, and if you're not able to recollect, and if you're not able to develop Krishna Prema, even after going to Vrajabhumi, it means that you haven't gone to Vrindavan, right? The whole purpose of going to Vrindavan is to actually develop Krishna Prema and feel the pastimes, or remember those pastimes. And how does this happen? The moment we meet devotees or take association of devotees, right? What happens is, this is kind of gives more and more better consciousness to actually feel the Dham presence or the Supreme Personality's presence, right? So this is called taking darshan or going to Dham. This is why it is said that to go to Dham, we need not buy a ticket and go to Dham. At the same time, after going to Dham also, we may not be able to see the Dham, right? So it is further it is said that when you go to places like Vrindavan, you have to see the Dham with ears, not with eyes. Eyes cannot see. In fact, for that matter, anyone who's wanting to, break the cycle of birth and death, wanting to go to Goloka or Vaikuntha Loka, these eyes cannot take us there, because that is not in the three-dimensional place like XYZ and time coordinates. It is not in the four-dimensional space. It is at an nth dimension which is beyond our vision, because our capacities can only see only four dimensions, X, Y, G and time dimension. Whereas the spiritual world, it is not that, I take a rocket or I go at a supersonic speed up in the sky and finally I see Goloka or I see Ayodhya or I see Brahmaloka. No, it is not like that. It is definitely not like that. It is not constrained within the spatial or time dimension, right? That is beyond time. That is beyond these XYZ three-dimensional spatial coordinates, right? So that is at a different dimension. And to go to that dimension, we need Shastra Chakshu, spiritual vision. And how do we get that spiritual vision? By the mercy of the devotees and spiritual master, right? So to cut the story short, to go and see Vrindavan, our eyes, the material senses are not sufficient. We have to see Vrindavan through ears. When we say we have to see Vrindavan through ears, it means that we need to hear to the pastimes of Supreme Lord from senior Vaishnavas or pure devotees. That is why it is said that when we go to any place which is called a Dham, the first thing that we should do is search for pure devotees, search for elevated devotees who actually can talk or give knowledge about that place and about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why Vidura, as he has been carrying Supreme Personality of Godhead within his heart all the time, he is considered to be more elevated. That's how Yudhishthir Maharaj, being so intelligent enough, he actually is asking Vidura, and in fact he is addressing Vidura as my lord, and he is considering him as his spiritual master, and telling and expressing his gratitude that wherever Vidura has gone, that place has got transformed to a pilgrimage because he is carrying Supreme Personality of God within his heart. And going to the next text, 13.15, again, this further elevates, Vidura's greatness. As long as Vidura played the part of Sudra, being cursed by Manduka Muni, Aryama officiated at the post of Yamaraja to punish those who committed sinful acts. So this is what we were talking about in the introduction of Vidura's context. So let's go through the highlighted text, then we'll discuss about this text. According to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, anyone who is conversant in the transcendental knowledge or the science of God, be a Brahmana, or a Sudra, a householder, or a sannyasi is eligible to become a spiritual master. Even in the ordinary moral codes maintained, even in the ordinary moral codes maintained by Chanakya Pandita, the great politician and moralist. Let me continue again. Even in the ordinary moral codes, there is no harm in taking lessons from a person who may be by birth less than a Sudra. So this is what actually is setting the context for Vidura being a great personality, right? This is one part of the answer. The other is that Vidura was not actually a Sudra. So here it actually talks about how the reason for Vidura's birth. He was to play the part of a so-called Sudra for 100 years, being cursed by Manduka Muni. He was the incarnation of Yamaraj. So Vidura was the incarnation of Yamaraj, one of the 12 Mahajans. In fact, he is Mahajan. Vidura is a Mahajan. On the level with such exalted personalities as Brahma, and here are the Mahajans: Brahma, Narada, Shiva, Kapila, Bhishma, Prahalada, etc. Being a Mahajana, it is the duty of Yamaraja to preach the cult of devotion to the people of the world, as Narada, Brahma, and other Mahajanas do. But Yamaraja is always busy in his plutonic kingdom punishing the doers of sinful acts. Yamaraja is deputed by the Lord to a particular planet, some hundreds of thousands of miles away from the planet of Earth. So this is another important thing. The Yamaraja's planet is hundreds of thousands of miles away from earthly planet. One of the in fact it talks about the reason also, to take away the corrupt souls after death and convict them in accordance with their respective sinful activities. So the Yamaloka is like hundreds of thousands of miles away from Earth planet. It is so far because Krishna wanted every one of us to have a peaceful life, doing the devotional service and developing Krishna prema. Right? So this is one of the reasons why Yamaloka is very, very far. Right? Thus, Yamaraja has very little time to take leave from his responsible office of punishing the wrongdoers. There are more wrongdoers than righteous men. Therefore, Yamaraja has to do more work than other demigods, who are also authorized agents of the Supreme Lord. But he wanted to preach the glories of the Lord, and therefore, by the will of Lord, he was cursed by Manduka Muni to come into the world in the incarnation of Vidura and work very hard as a great devotee. Such a devotee is neither a Sudra nor a Brahmana. So here it talks about Vidura. Vidura is neither a Sudra nor a Brahmana. Who is he? He is Yamaraj, none other than Yamaraj. And he is one of the Mahajans, right? In fact, the other Mahajans are, even Shiva and Narada were also there in the Mahajans. Narada is our spiritual master, and Shiva is this, he is the Laikaraka, right? So he is put at that level if we look at it, right? So one very important thing to observe over here is Vidura is neither a Sudra nor a Brahmana, and he is very well qualified for a spiritual master. And the other most important thing to look at here is the Supreme Lord wanted Yamaraja, because Yamaraja has, we know, right? Yamaraja is the person, he's a mercy personified or compassion personified, which means if we look at it, we might consider harming an ant as not a very great sin or painful activity, but Yamaraj, he doesn't differentiate between an ant and a human being or a very big beast. The pain to an ant, pain to human being, he equally suffers with that, right? So Yamaraj is the one who doesn't even want to do even a smallest of the small, doesn't want to give even a smallest of the small pains to any living entity. And we can imagine what kind of pain he is undergoing, right? He's going such a kind of exalted personality is Yamaraj, right? And now, why I'm actually talking about Yamaraj is he's such an exalted personality. Now, he is very much qualified to preach someone, isn't it? So a person, a compassion personified person, and who is actually taking care of dharma and who is actually making justice to injustice, right? Such a person is very much qualified to actually preach, right? I'm having some bandwidth issues. Probably I'll stop my video. Yeah. So such a compassion personified personality is Yamaraj, right? And Yamaraj is asked to take birth in Bhuloka by the mercy of the Supreme Lord to preach Supreme Lord's instructions. and there has to be a way to do that, right? That way is to get a curse from Manduka Muni. In fact, the curse goes something like this. There is one 14 years old boy who was given punishment for something, which is not really abominable. So what happens is this Manduka Muni comes to Yamaraj, and then he curses him, saying that you are going to take birth in Sodra's family. In fact, in addition to that, there is an exemption that is given, that anyone who is under 14, they are not given punishment for the misdeeds that they do. It is considered that living entities under the age of, or human beings under the age of 14 are considered not to be so judgmental in terms of doing things. That is why it is said that if some sin or something is done by children of age less than 14 years, they are not supposed to be given any punishment by Yamaras. This is one another exemption. It doesn't mean that we can go ahead when we are our children who are less than 14 years can go ahead and do anything. No, that is not an exemption. But technically, the children under 14 years are not supposed to be punished by Yamaras for the misdeeds that they do, because it is said that they are not judgmental enough in doing it. And even if you look at it, the other way of looking at it is, when someone does something, a good or bad, it is the consciousness that actually incurs the sin. For example, if there is something called mercy killing, right? If someone is really suffering because of some pain, and in wars it used to happen, right? So if they're not able to fight, and during the war the soldiers have to travel a lot longer distances. During the travel, those warriors which were actually kind of hurt really bad, they cannot walk long. So what happens is, they have to be given some kind of they need additional people help. But at the same time, if the commando cannot afford to give such a kind of help, what they used to do is, they used to mercy kill the person, which means, anyway, even if they live, they have to live with that pain. So to reduce that pain, they do mercy killing. Now tell me, is the mercy killing good or bad? But of course, with right judgment. The person who is judging whether the mercy killing has to happen or not has to be really an elevated person, and should be able to rightly judge whether that thing has to happen or not. So mercy killing, when it is instructed, it is for the good of the person suffering the pain. Because anyway, even if he lives, he cannot continue his life with that pain. Anyway, he had to suffer that pain till death. Or some people who are in coma, and we don't know what kind of pains they are undergoing, they were given some kind of mercy killing, right? So if you look at it now, the person who is doing this mercy killing, should he be given punishment? No, he should not be given punishment, because he is undergoing so much pain to even do mercy killing to the other person, right? So if you look at this consciousness, the person who, though he is a killer, he should not be given punishment. Rather, he will increase his good deeds account, because he is taking pain to give mercy death to other person. Now, coming back to the 14 children under 14 years, what happens is, their consciousness while doing may not be with a bad intent, right? That is why when we do certain things, more than that work, the consciousness is more important. In fact, that is how akarma, vikarma, and karma are also derived, right? If you look at giving things in charity to others, it is same as giving in charity, whether you're doing it with in relation to Krishna consciousness, or you're giving in relation to this attain the so-called Swargaloka. Both are same. At the end of the day, you are buying something for 100 rupees and giving that in charity. And in one case, what you're doing is, the 100 rupees stuff you're offering to the Supreme Lord and giving in charity. And in other scenario, you're just buying it and giving it to attain Swargaloka, or to get good deeds in your account, right? So if you look at it, the result is same for the person receiving it. For the person who is receiving it, he is getting something which is worth 100 rupees. But the consciousness of the person who is giving it actually gives him karma, vikarma, rakarma. Right? If I offer it to Krishna and then give it, I get akarma. I don't get any karma. But on the other hand, if I'm giving it, not offering it to Krishna and just giving it to get, heavenly planets, that gives karma, right? Or sukarma. So this is what I'm trying to stress here is, the consciousness is more important while something is done. Now, it is considered that for children under 14 years, the consciousness is not with the mind, not with the bent of mind to gain either good or bad deeds. Hence, when some bad deeds are done by children less than 14 years, it is said that they are not supposed to be punished in Yamaloka. Right? Okay, so to further go and talk about Vidura. So Vidura is in his previous birth he is Yamaraj, and by the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he underwent a curse by Manduka Muni, and he appears in Bhuloka as Vidura, and he takes birth as birth to Sudri. Now, text 18, this actually further talks about Vidra's greatness, and then now the next, I mean, till now what we've discussed is we've talked about who is Vidra and the reason behind his birth, and how he is actually is very well qualified to be a preacher. These things we discussed, right? Now the next topic, the next extract from this chapter 13 is Vidra's instructions to Dhritarashtra. Now let's go to text 18. Now the translation says Mahatma Vidra. If we look at it, now Vidra has gotten 3 words before his name. First, Yudhishthir Maharaj said, "My Lord Vidra." And then Vidra is a Mahajan because Yamaraj is a Mahajan. Out of the 12 Mahajans, Vidra is Mahajan. So Mahajan Vidra, that is the second. And third addressal is Mahatma Vidra. Right? Sota Goswami is talking about this. Mahatma Vidra knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra. So before to this context, how it goes is, Vidra, getting the knowledge about the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his pastimes from Maitreya Muni, they're talking about, how the souls suffer in material world and all. In that context, so in between we skipped some texts, right? So in that context, it is said that here Mahatma Vidra knew all this. All this means the material suffering of living entities because of the contact with Mahat Tattva and undergoing the material sense gratification, all these things. All when we say all this, the context is that. And Mahatma Vidra knew all this, and therefore he addressed Dhritarashtra. So now he started addressing Dhritarashtra. He came back and he was given a nice seat by Yudhishthir Maharaj, and all the whereabouts were discussed. And Yudhishthir praised Vidra with all his obeisances. Now Vidra started talking to Dhritarashtra. Now Vidra is so compassionate on Dhritarashtra, so compassionate on Dhritarashtra. This is what happens with Vaishnavas, right? Despite of we doing so many mistakes, right? The Vaishnavas are so compassionate. They wanted to give Krishna prema, right? Now he started saying to Dhritarashtra, "My dear king, please get out of here immediately. Do not delay. Just see how fear has overtaken you." So here there are 2 words that are important here. Immediately, fear. These 2 things are very important. Now, why Vidura is saying, "Get out from here immediately"? It is not that Vidura is envious of Dhritarashtra. It is not that he is trying to take revenge on Dhritarashtra. But Vidura, being so compassionate, he gained all the knowledge, right? When someone becomes a devotee of Supreme Personality of Godhead, when someone gathers knowledge about the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he actually gathers the entire knowledge. What is called knowledge? In fact, we have been hearing for the last 4 or 5 sessions during Sunday Satsangs from Lilananda Prabhuji that right knowledge is nothing but the knowledge which actually shows us the path to reach the Supreme Personality of Godhead and get Krishna Prema. Everything else, these maths, physics, chemistry, law, CA, all these things are considered to be ignorance. What is knowledge? Knowledge is one thing which actually sheds light on the path to reach Krishna Prema. That is called knowledge. And in fact, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says everything else which is not taking you to the path of salvation is ignorance. It could be publications published by Nobel laureates or great researches that are happening around the world. All these things are considered to be ignorance, absolute ignorance, because if they're not leading to Krishna Prema, they're all considered to be ignorance. Right? Even lifting a small grass, if it is in the direction of going to attain Krishna Prema, then that is knowledge. So here he is saying that, "My dear king, please get out from here immediately." Vidura being attained all this knowledge, and when someone attains Krishna Prema or knowledge, what happens is he becomes compassionate towards every living entity. Panditaha Samadarshinaha. He becomes compassionate towards every living entity. Right? So he became compassionate to other living entities. What to speak of his relation with Dhritarashtra? He's a brother of Dhritarashtra, right? So he being so compassionate, now he's understanding Dhritarashtra is gonna dwindle. His time is up. He's not left with any more time. And the second thing that he's stressing on here is, see how fear has overtaken you. Right? So it is very important to note about fear here. In fact, there are many yogas which actually asks you to smile. When we do smile, there are so many muscles that actually blossom on the face. In turn, they give rise to a lot of positive energy, Ashtalakshmi, in and around the aura. Right? So it is very important to smile. What is the reason behind it? The moment we smile, what happens? See, these emotions are always related to liver. In fact, every single activity that a human being does, every single thing that he undergoes is related to one organ. Likewise, emotions are directly related to liver. Right? I can take one example. Actually, what happened was when I was working in Oracle, I was living in Nanal Nagar. So it was a three-bedroom flat that we were living in. We were six people living in one flat, three-bedroom flat. And in my room, used to be one of my roommates. He used to work for Accenture. Right. One day, what happened was in the evening he took bath. He went to the washroom, and he took bath. I think it's around 7 to 8, between 7 to 8 p.m. He just came out of the house. He just came out of the washroom. I was so close, and he was my roommate. I played a prank with him. What happened is I just played a prank to make some sound like a kind of booth. So what happened is he just came out of the washroom, and then he's coming out, and then he got scared because of the sound that I did, and he got fever for 3 days. The fever did not leave him for 3 days. And if you go to readings of medicine, fever is something that comes because of liver's instability. So if you look at it, there is an emotional trauma that he underwent, which is like fear that he underwent, and that fear in turn actually caused him to get fever. So fear equal to fever. And where did the fever come from? Fever actually is coming from liver. So which means that liver is something that actually undergoes the side effects of all the emotions, whether it is happy, distress, anxiety, fear, happiness, anything that you call, any emotion is directly going to give a side effect to liver. Having said this, so now Vidura is very much perturbed or worried about Dhritarashtra, because Dhritarashtra is already fear stricken. Having said that, he had to take a decision now to get a salvation. So Vidura wanted Dhritarashtra to get liberated. Now Dhritarashtra is still hanging around, in the kingdom itself. He's not going anywhere. And if you look at it, look at his attachment to the material situations. He's born blind, so he cannot enjoy anything with his eyes or senses. And secondly, he was like fear stricken because he lost all his 100 sons, and he has to live on the mercy of Pandu's sons. Of course, I mean, Yudhishthir Maharaj is not as bad as his 100 Kauravas, but still, he had to live on the mercy of Pandavas. On top of that, he had to eat the remnants from Bhima and Yudhishthira, because what happened at the time of Pandavas. What used to happen is, when all the five brothers, when all the four brothers finish their eating, Yudhishthir, Arjun, Nakul, and Sahadev, after the eating, whatever is left is used to be given to Bhima, because Bhima is very voracious eater. He used to finish all the food that is left over. Now, if you look at Dhritarashtra, what he used to get is the remnants from Bhima. Right? After Bhima eating, of course, Bhima is a devotee of the Supreme Lord, so he is definitely compassionate and concerned for Dhritarashtra. So he definitely used to give good amount of food for Dhritarashtra. But anyone who is like, even nowadays, the elders were given food that was left over, right? So after Bhima had his food, the leftovers were given to Dhritarashtra. So he is born blind. He lost all his 100 sons. He cannot enjoy any further kingdom, and he is eating the remnants that were given from Bhima and Yudhishthir. So with all these things, still he is hanging around the kingdom, right? So Vidura is trying to help him realize and come to his actual consciousness, so that he can take a decision, because time is not much time, not much of a time is left for him to go and get moksham, right? So Dhritarashtra was given instructions by Vidura. Now if you look at it, for Dhritarashtra, despite of Vidura being a younger son, he took the role of a spiritual master for him, and he started instructing. Let's go to the next text where he further continues his instructions. Right? Yeah, this is what we were talking about. In this instruction, Vidura is saying, you have been blind from your very birth, and recently you have become hard hearing. So he lost his hearing power also. Your memory is shortened, and your intelligence is disturbed. Your teeth are loose. Your liver is defective, and you are coughing up mucus. So what happens is, in fact, it is said that liver tells the age of the person. So if someone gets 100 years liver, it is 100 years. No one can change it. And on top of that, it can further damage if we have the ill behavior in our mind. So what happens is, any bad emotions, any bad thoughts is directly going to hit the liver. In fact, the direct observation that we can have is, when the liver is going down, right, what happens is your muscle tenderness goes down. So liver is the only organ in the body which actually creates that elasticity or tenderness in the body. That's why for younger children the liver is very, healthy. That's why they will have very soft and tender tissues and muscles, right? So people lose teeth during their old age because the liver is not able to supply enough of elasticity to the teeth. Not only teeth, even the body, goes down, right? Different limbs and all, they cannot hold, they cannot hold the weight of the flesh. So the flesh just becomes so soft and inelastic and brittle, right? That's why at times when anyone, in fact, one another advantage with liver is one organ which actually can rejuvenate by itself. Even if you have 20 grams of liver, that can become 200 grams of liver in the body. So liver is a very important and the great gift that was given to us by God. So if you can actually safeguard liver, which means if we can live happily without any anxiety and envy and pride, you will live the best life, or the very good quality life, right? So liver is something that actually decides our health. In fact, of course, in turn, further spawnings also, right? So when the liver goes down, every tissue in the body, including brain tissue, goes down. That's why even memory will be lost and intelligence is disturbed. All these things are happening. So see, what kind of information that we are having in Bhagavatam. That's why it is called, Bhagavatam is manual for us to live. It is a cookbook. It is a dictionary. It is what not. It is even talking about liver here, which no allopathy doctor talks about, right? So liver is the most ignored part in the body, and of course it is the most important part in the body, which is the most ignored by allopathy. But Ayurveda says you have to take care of your liver. In fact, it says heart attack starts at liver, not at heart. This is another interesting thing. There are three kinds of different heart attacks, right? I'm talking about one of the most predominant heart attack. The three kinds of heart attacks are: one is due to brain death, the heart stucks. That is called stroke. It's a stroke that happened in brain, but that lead to stopping of heart. That is stroke. And the other two kind, out of three, this is one. Stroke is one, and the second one is blocks. Blocks will happen when we have wrong food and because of sedentary life. And third kind of thing is heart attack. Heart attack is nothing but, so heart actually gets blood through something called cardiovascular flexible tubes. I know it because my advisor from my masters, he's doing research. In fact, he got an award for discovering for doing certain discoveries on cardiovascular flexible tubes. So heart actually is pumped or equipped with tubes that are called cardiovascular flexible tubes. So cardio because it is related to heart, vascular because they pump, flexible. This flexible word is very important. Flexible means they are like, they can take, flexible is nothing but elasticity. You expand them, they comes back to that state. That flexibility is very, very important for the uh, these tubes that actually take and supply blood to the heart. Now this flexibility, as we said some time back, liver is something that actually gives flexibility and tenderness to any tissues in the muscle. Now if liver is going down and down, who will give that flexibility to the cardiovascular flexible tubes? No one. No organ in the body can give that flexibility. So the moment the flexibility to these cardiovascular flexible tubes is gone, they become brittle. Now you can think of something like, if you have bought in a water pipe, when it is new, it can actually hold the pressure. Even if you pump it with a very, very high pressure, it actually can withhold, and it expands and gives enough of pressure back. But imagine that you kept the pipe, that whatever water pipe on the terrace. Say that you left it for 3 months or 4 months, and you go back and observe it. It becomes so brittle you can't even bend it. For that matter, if you have leather shoes, you keep it in the rack for 6 months, don't use it. It becomes so brittle, right? Now after that, if you try to use it, what happens is that cannot hold the pressure, so it just breaks out. That is called brittleness. So this is the difference between flexibility, elasticity and brittlety. So when something becomes brittle, that breaks. Now when people get high blood pressure, the tubes which are supposed to be flexible have become brittle because of liver ill health. That breaks. That's how the third kind of heart attack happens. And heart attack is the most predominant attack in current world, current scenario. So in olden days we never heard of so many heart attacks, but now we are hearing more and more because the liver is going down, not the heart. In fact, if liver goes down, we might lead longer life, but the life is not going to be of good quality. Lost teeth, lost memory. This is what Dhritarashtra is undergoing now here. And Vidura, out of compassion, he's trying to tell Dhritarashtra, you're not left with much of time. So go back and then try to focus on your journey back home. So out of his compassion, he started instructing his brother. Okay. We'll go to the next text. This text talks about, okay, in between. So here it is text 22 and here it is 38. In between, what happens is Dhritarashtra actually becomes so compassionate. So what happens is, after Vidura gave enough of instructions, Dhritarashtra realizes. In between 22 to 38, what happens is Dhritarashtra realizes that he had to leave. Vidura does brainwash so much out of compassion, Dhritarashtra is convinced. Now Dhritarashtra leaves to exile. Right? He goes to the Himalayan mountains towards the southern part. When he leaves, along with him, Gandhari also leaves. We know about Gandhari, right? Just to give a context of Gandhari, she's a very beautiful woman in her days. And she, in fact, she goes to the next level. She does tapasya to Lord Shiva to get 100 children. And Lord Shiva tries to explain, this, that, but she is not ready to listen. He says, Tatasthu. Right? And the person who actually can give birth to 100 children is Dhritarashtra. So she comes to know that she had to marry to the blind person. And the moment she comes to know, she actually ties a lot of silk threads around her eyes. Because silk thread is something it is very opaque that light cannot penetrate through it. It is not transparent, it is very opaque. Silk is very opaque. That's why she tries silk threads to make sure that even smallest of the light doesn't pass through, go into her eyes. Such a kind of chastised woman, chastised wife she was. But because of her, in fact, she was not for the war, but she always had that agony towards Dhritarashtra because he was the person who made that war happen. And she had gotten a lot of affection to her sons. Hence, she had to suffer. Despite of being so beautiful and great devotee of Lord Shiva, still she had to suffer because he is on the other side of the table, towards Adharma. Right? So, because of her chastity, she follows Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra goes to exile upon the instructions of Vidura. Along with Dhritarashtra, Gandhari also follows him. And they both, and in fact, Vidura tells, don't reveal this to anyone because, though you have cheated Yudhishthir Maharaj in so many ways, he's very compassionate. And even now he remembers how you have done that caretaker job to him while his father was left. He's very compassionate to his brothers and you. Because you have taken care of his brothers, you are a very good caretaker of Yudhishthir and his family. So he's so compassionate that he may not let you go. So Vidura tells him and then tells him to go without telling any single person in the kingdom. So Dhritarashtra, without, now if you look at it, what happened here? Here, Vidura is the Shastra Chakshudana. He did Shastra Chakshudana to Dhritarashtra. Right? Vidura has become the spiritual master of Dhritarashtra. And he gave him spiritual vision. Shastra Chakshu he gave. Then that's how Dhritarashtra realizes and leaves to exile. That's when Gandhari also follows him. But while going, they don't tell anyone upon the instruction of Vidura. Now, Yudhishthir gets up in the morning, and after morning, what he does is we know, right? He does Surya Namaskaram and gives water to sun god, and then comes back, and he always gives the obeisances to elders in the kingdom. I mean, in the palace. So he goes into Dhritarashtra's chamber. He could not find he could find neither Dhritarashtra nor Gandhari. Now he is bewildered. Now he goes to Sanjaya. Now, when he goes to Sanjaya and he tells this, Sanjaya also starts searching for Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. Now, though Sanjaya is a great devotee, he knew about Dhritarashtra's ill thought process. Still, he's a boss for Sanjaya. So Sanjaya also gets bewildered out of his compassion. Both Yudhishthir Maharaj and Sanjaya, they both get bewildered, and they started lamenting, like, where is my boss? Sanjaya says, where is my stepfather? Yudhishthir says. They start searching. Finally, Narada appears. Right? So Narada appears, then Sanjaya starts speaking to Narada. Sri Narada, the powerful devotee of the Lord, appeared on the scene carrying his tumbura. We know, right? Narada uses every single thing in the service of the Lord. He is carrying tumbura in his hands and Harinam on his tongue. So he carries tumbura, he appeared there. Maharaja Yudhishthira and his brothers received him properly by getting up their seats and offering obeisances. So here it is a little context that talks about Narada. Let's go through the purport of his Divine Srila Prabhupada. It says, the purport says, such personalities as Narada must be offered all due respect, like those offered to the personality of Godhead himself. So here, this is something that we discussed in the beginning of the session. A spiritual master should be given equal respect the way that we respect Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is so important because without the spiritual master giving us Shastra Chakshu, spiritual vision, we cannot see Goloka. Even if we may be in Goloka, but we cannot see it and we cannot realize it. Right? As I said, it is not like taking a supersonic flight and then going up in the sky to go to Goloka, right? It is in separate dimension. It is not in spatial dimension. It is not in time dimension. We need spiritual vision. Next dimensional vision is what we need to see Goloka. And that next dimensional vision can be given only by the spiritual master. Hence, it is given by the spiritual master. We have to give equal respect and obeisances to spiritual master the way that we give to Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. Right? So here it is said, such personalities as Narada must be offered all due respects, like those offered to the personality of Godhead himself. And Maharaj Yudhishthira, along with his noble brothers, were examples for others in receiving a pure devotee of Lord like Narada, who had no other business save and no other business save and except singing the glories of the Lord, along with the veena, a musical stringed instrument. If you look at it, here the stress is on two things. One, Narada is, no doubt, he is a spiritual master. And two, what now Yudhishthira is a Maharaj, right? So such a kind of Maharaj is giving such a great respect to a spiritual master like Narada. So what to speak of us? So when we give respect to a spiritual master, we have to remember people like Yudhishthira, Prahlad Maharaj, Dhruv Maharaj, Prithu Maharaj. These people, what kind of respect that they used to give to spiritual master, and what kind of respect they used to give to Supreme Personality of Godhead. There should not be even a tinge of difference between the respect given to spiritual master and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That's why when we do Harati in the morning, the first thing that we do is we take permission from the spiritual master and we tell spiritual master that, can you help me? Can you help me? So what were we doing when we light the agarbatti or when we light the lamp? What we actually do is we are not actually offering them to spiritual master, but rather we are telling that, my Guru, please give me permission. At the same time, let me help you in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It is not that we are serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We cannot serve Supreme Personality of Godhead. We cannot serve Radharani. We cannot serve Guru Parampara. All that we can do is we can ask our spiritual master the permission, and the permission not to offer the lamp, not to offer agarbatti, to actually help them offering the thing. So when we do Harati, the consciousness should be something like, we are not giving Harati to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All that we are doing is we are helping our Guru Parampara for them to give Harati. So what we are doing when we are showing the agarbatti or lamp or chamara to the disciples, to the Guru Parampara, what are we doing is we are telling, let me help. Let me help you while you are actually doing offering these things to the lordships, right? So when we show, this is what the consciousness and intent with which we do, right? So this is how, if we do sadhana like this, that would definitely gets the blessings from the gurus, and that's how we can actually progress in this spiritual. For that matter, forget about spiritual master. Even your shiksha, you have to give enough of respect even to your Vartamana Pradakshit Guru. What I meant by Vartamana Pradakshit Guru is a guru, even a person may not be a devotee who actually comes and connects us to the disciplic succession is called Vartamana Pradakshit Guru, right? We have to give enough of respect even to Vartamana Pradakshit Guru, right? In fact, it is said that Shiksha Guru should be given such an importance the way that we give to our actual spiritual master, Diksha Guru. Why we have to give so much importance to Shiksha Guru? For that matter, we can say Srila Prabhupada is a permanent Shiksha Guru for everyone. Of course, we have our Diksha Guru. Srila Prabhupada is a Shiksha Guru for everyone. Anyone who reads his books, the moment we read or spell or open his book, he becomes a Shiksha Guru for us. Right? So it is very important to give respect to Shiksha Guru, Vartamana Pradakshit Guru, and Diksha Guru. Right? And what kind of respect we should give? We should give the respect the way it is given by Yudhishthira Maharaj to Narada. Right? We'll further go to the next text. So here it talks about Yudhishthira's compassion. Now, why did Yudhishthira give so much of respect to Narada? One, he is spiritual master. Two, he is in bewildered situation. Yudhishthir Maharaj and Sanjaya both were in a bewildered situation because they can't see Dhritarashtra, their elder, right? Out of compassion to Dhritarashtra, they wanted to inquire more from Narada. So they gave him nice seat and offered all the services and then started inquiring from Narada. Now Narada started his instructions. And what did Narada say? Again, I'm skipping between text 38 to 42. In between, Narada starts speaking and Narada starts giving instruction here. Narada says, as a cow bound through the nose by a long rope is conditioned, so also human beings are bound by different Vedic injunctions and are conditioned to obey the orders of the Supreme. It is not that we have to obey the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead only in a material world. Indirectly, we will be obeying the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead even in Goloka also. But what is the difference? Here we are forced to obey the orders. There, out of happiness, without our knowledge, implicitly we will be obeying the orders of the spiritual master. There is no place in this entire Andapinda Brahmanda, there is no place where the laws of Supreme Personality of Godhead are not there. Every single place, the laws of Supreme Personality of Godhead are there, which actually supports Dharma. Right? What is the reason behind these laws made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Only one reason, that is establishing Dharma. So I'm not going to go through the entire purport. I'll just go through the stressed word here. The statutory laws of the state are imperfect imitation replicas of religious codes. So what are we under? The moment we come in contact with Mahat Tattva or the material world, what happens is we are under the laws made by man. Whereas when you are in devotional service, you are definitely out of the clutches of the Mahatattva or the material world. You are completely out of the clutches, and then you will be able to be under the laws made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For that matter, the material laws are kind of a reflection of what were made for the spiritual world. Right? The statutory laws of the state are imperfect imitations, are replicas of the religious codes. Because they are imperfect, the sufferings are also very imperfect. Right? The sufferings that one undergoes in this material world are imperfect because the laws are also imperfect. And one important thing to note here is we cannot escape from the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whether we are in material world or in spiritual world or anywhere in the Andapinda Brahmandas, anywhere in the infinite number of universes. We have to go through the laws of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? This text further talks about Narada's instructions to Yudhishthira and Sanjaya. Narada is further saying, those who are devoid of hands are prey for those who have hands. Who are devoid of hands? Those four-legged animals are nothing but the ones who are devoid of hands. They are prey for those who have hands. Who have hands? The kings and the hunters. They have hands. They hunt those four-legged animals. Those devoid of legs are prey for the four-legged. Which means those who are devoid of legs, which means creeping, or snakes, all those lizards, all those things, they become prey for the four-legged, which is like cats and lions, tigers. They actually prey on the no-legged living entities. Right? The weak are the subsistence of the strong, and the general rule holds that one living being is food for another. Now, what kind of life is this? Is it so worse that it is not just about this? Is just an the analogy that we can derive out from here is Iran is under the under the fear of getting attacked by United States, right? And of course, recently, when we kind of declared war, now Pakistan is under the fear of getting a war from India, right? So it is not just about entities devoid of hands are prey for uh, entities who have hands, and it is not just that entities without legs are prey for entities with legs. It doesn't just stop there. This rule is there everywhere in the material world. Right? So Narada is trying to say, okay, let's go through the purport further. Exploitation of the weaker living being by the stronger is the natural law of existence. What is the law of existence? The law of existence is the weaker is always attacked and becomes prey by the stronger. There is always an attempt to devour the weak in different kingdoms of living beings. There is no possibility of checking this tendency by any artificial means under the material conditions. Here comes one important thing that I'll stress on. It can be checked only by awakening spiritual sense of the human beings by practicing of spiritual regulations. So this sentence is very important. The moment you come into contact of a devotee or Krishna consciousness, what happens? It can be the weak getting attacked by the strong is checked only by awakening the spiritual sense of human being by practice of spiritual regulations. However, how is it actually checked? If you look at it, we have gotten four regulative principles. Out of these four regulative principles, few regulative principles stops us from the tendency of killing, and other regulative principle directly stops us from killing. What are the regulative principles which stops us the tendency to kill? Greed, right? To actually enjoy opposite sex. So one of the regulative principles is to stop illicit sex, and another regulative principle is to stop gambling. These two regulative principles actually stops us from building more and more greed or more and more lust. When that lust or the greed is stopped, we don't try to eat on others. And the other regulative principle that directly actually checks us from attacking on others is no meat eating. Right? So if you look at the four regulative principles, the four regulative principles, yamas and niyamas, are set for one to become a responsible living in it, a responsible citizen. These yamas and niyamas are actually to inculcate good qualities on us. So because if you look at it, the entire problem in this universe, our entire problem for someone to suffer is weak attacking or strong exploiting the weaker. The moment that is checked, part of the suffering is removed, right? So when we are in devotional service, the four regulative principles that were instructed to us are actually checkers for us to become a better and responsible human beings. Further, it says the spiritual regulative principles, however, do not allow a man to slaughter a weaker animals on one side and teach others peaceful coexistence. So this no meat eating actually teaches us this peaceful coexistence. If man does not allow the animals peaceful coexistence, how can he expect peaceful existence in human society? Because in one of the Prabhupada's books, there is a cover page. Actually, in that the book name is Laws of Nature. You can go and read it. It's a small book. It comes under small book category. The book name is Laws of Nature. In that book, a human being with a buffalo head actually tries to kill a buffalo with a human being head. That is the cover page. That was the first book that I read in 1990, not 1999, 2000. That was a book gifted to me by my, you can call Vartaman Pradakshak Guru, right? She gifted me that book, and when she gifted me that book, I got scared first looking at it. I was very sensitive. I was kind of very introvert, and then my mom used to take care of me so much that I was like so sensitive. They were very skeptical at that time of me finishing my engineering because of the sensitive nature, right? So I was so sensitive. The first moment I saw the book, I got bewildered. Someone killing with someone holding an axe in his hands, who is like buffalo headed, is trying to kill a buffalo which is human headed, right? But I started reading that book, and when I read that book, it exactly talks about these principles. A killer should be killed is something that I gained from that book. Killer should be killed. It's as simple as that. The laws of nature says killer should be killed. Now, if we are not worried about the coexistence, and if we are going on, if someone is slaughtering it, obviously he will be slaughtered. There is no doubt about it, right? And further it says the kingdom of God or Ramarajya is impossible without awakening of God consciousness in the mass mind of the people of the world. So Ramarajya means peace and coexistence. Of course, some idiots talk about Rama when he was in exile. Some even educated secularists and idiots also tell that Ramayana says Rama stopped eating non-vegetarian because of separation from Sita. It means that Rama has eaten non-vegetarian. What kind of stupid thought process is that? In fact, while leaving, Rama promises Kausalya that in any circumstance I will not eat non-vegetarian food. That is what Rama says. Because anyone who actually goes to exile, it is possible that they might not have anything in the midst of the night. They might have to hunt animals and eat. So Rama is assuring Kausalya that even in the midst of the night, even in a scenario where I don't get any food or any roots or any leaves, even in such situation, also I will not eat non-vegetarian food. That is the promise he is making to Kausalya. But our secular idiots, what do they say? Rama said he is not gonna eat non-vegetarian food in exile, which means he has been eating in his palace. This is what this is what is called useless dimensional vision. So the 4 dimensions that we have, X, Y, Z, and the time dimension, these dimensions doesn't give us spiritual vision. When we are devoid of spiritual vision, this is the kind of derivations that we do, right? So it is very important to understand what is Ramarajya. Ramarajya means the one thumb rule in Ramarajya is peaceful coexistence, and we should understand that the peaceful coexistence doesn't happen without following the 4 regulative principles. The 4 regulative principles talks about Saucham, Daya, uh, cleanliness, I mean, and the peaceful coexistence. The peaceful coexistence comes out of these 4 regulative principles, and these 4 regulative principles were very well followed during Ramarajya. Out of which one is no meat eating, and it is called Ramarajya because there was no animal slaughter. So the summary of this text is Narada is trying to actually pacify Yudhishthira Maharaj and Sanjaya. Right? We'll further continue to text 48. Here, Narada is further continuing his instructions. He's saying that, therefore, O king, you should look at the Supreme Lord only, who is one without a second. This is very important. Supreme Lord is one without a second. We'll discuss about this. And who manifests himself by different energies and is both within and without. What does it mean? We might come and say that, here it is saying that Supreme Personality is one without a second. Does it mean that the Supreme Personality is just Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Narsingadev, all these are not there, are different from Krishna? No. Supreme Lord is one without a second. At the same time, he manifests himself by his different energies. Supreme Lord expands himself as Sankarshana or Balarama. Sankarshana comes from Balarama. From Sankarshana comes Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Kshirodakshay Vishnu, and Mahavishnu. All this expansion comes from Supreme Lord's manifestations, right? So there is a purport that I actually highlighted, which is kind of little essence that I felt from this context. It's said by Srila Prabhupada that there is, however, a regular current from the Lord himself, from within and without, by which to rectify the fallen condition of the living being. From within, he corrects the desiring living beings as localized Paramatma, and from without, he corrects by his manifestations. So if you look at this text, what it says is, from within, he corrects the desiring living beings as localized Paramatma. So Supreme Lord is there within as localized Paramatma, and from without he corrects by his manifestations, the spiritual master and the revealed scriptures. So here, who is the spiritual master? His spiritual master is also a manifestation of Krishna's energy from without, and he manifested within as Paramatma. So here, this is where we have to give so much importance to spiritual master. Spiritual master is Supreme Personality of Godhead's manifestation. One should look on to the Lord. One should not be disturbed by the so-called manifestations of happiness or distress, but he should try to cooperate with the Lord in his outward activities for correcting the fallen souls. By his order only, one should become a spiritual master. So here it is talking about the spiritual master's qualities. So by Supreme Personality of Godhead's order only, one should become what should be the qualities of spiritual master are what discussed over here. One should become a spiritual master and cooperate with the Lord. One should not become a spiritual master for one's personal benefit, for some material gain, or as a revenue of business or occupation for earning livelihood. Bona fide spiritual masters who look unto the Supreme Lord to cooperate with him are actually qualitatively one with the Lord, and the forgetful ones are perverted reflections only. Yudhishthira Maharaj is advised by Narada, therefore, not to be disturbed by the affairs of so-called happiness and distress, but to look only unto the Lord, to execute the mission for which the Lord has destined. That was his prime duty. So now if you look at it, there are 3 things that are happening in this purport. One, Prabhupada is talking about what is a spiritual master. 2, how Yudhishthira was giving respect to spiritual master. 3, by giving respect to spiritual master and following the instructions of spiritual master, what happened to Yudhishthira, and what can happen to any devotee who actually listens to spiritual master. For that matter, what can happen to a devotee who actually listens to Siksha Guru, or for that matter, Diksha Guru, right? So here, the qualities of spiritual masters are, spiritual master is one who actually cooperates with the Supreme Lord. What does mean by cooperating with the Supreme Lord? What is the whole and soul goal of the Supreme Lord? To establish Dharma. So spiritual master's whole and soul goals should be to cooperate with the Lord to establish the Supreme Lord's goal, that is establishing Dharma. There should be no second agenda. If so, for that matter, many of us know that the spiritual masters, His Holiness Radhana Swami Maharaj, Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, who left the body, and Rampa Swami Maharaj, Jayapada Swami Maharaj, do we know that they don't even have a bank account? No Maharaj in ISKCON has a bank account. So they completely depend on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Rake Krishna Mareko, Mare Krishna Rakeko. Can we leave our bank accounts? Is it possible for us to live without our bank accounts? We are infinitesimal, whereas the spiritual master is infinitely big, because he had to take care of so many of his disciples. He had to, take even the sins of so many disciples while he gives the initiation, right? So these spiritual masters and all the gurus, Maharaj we have in ISKCON Parampara are all not ordinary souls. They live on the mercy of Krishna. They work for the goal of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right? So the quality of spiritual master, or any guru for that matter, should be only one. That is to satisfy the Lord and work in line with the Lord's goal to make more and more devotees and establish the peaceful coexistence, which is possible by following the 4 regulative principles. So Yudhishthira Maharaj very well know that Narada is a great spiritual master. Right? So second thing he did, he gave respect to spiritual master, and third thing he did is listen to Narad Maharaj. So his bewilderment is slowly going down and down. Why was he bewildered? He was bewildered because he was in anxiety of losing his paternal father, Dhritarashtra Maharaj. Dhritarashtra, right? So he listened, and his anxiety is further going down. Let's go further to the next text. Now, what happened in between text 48 and 52 is he gives more knowledge. Narada, till now, what he did is he kind of tried to pacify Yudhishthira Maharaj and Sanjaya, telling them that there is no cause of concern, there is no reason for the bewilderment. And now he started giving more and more details about Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. He further says in between 48 and 52, gives the exact coordinates of where Dhritarashtra is. He tells that he is in the southern part of the Himalayan mountains, and he further tells that he is at a place called Saptasrota. Saptasrota means divided by 7. Actually, the river gets divided into 7 to actually give satisfaction to 7 different rishis here. So he says the place is called Saptasrota because there the waters of the sacred Ganges were divided into 7 branches. This was done for the satisfaction of the 7 great rishis. We'll further continue to 55. Here it talks about finally, how Dhritarashtra has gone to exile. In fact, even Dhritarashtra gets liberated. We will get to know about that in this one in the next text. This translation says Dhritarashtra will have to amalgamate. So Narada further continuing. Dhritarashtra will have to amalgamate his pure identity with intelligence and then merge into the Supreme Being with knowledge of his qualitative oneness. It is very important to understand that merging with knowledge of his qualitative oneness, not merging with the body, merging with the soul, or merging into the tube light, as Lilananda Prabhuji says. Right? So here it talks about merging with knowledge of his qualitative oneness as a living entity with the Supreme Brahman. Being freed from the blocked sky, he will have to rise to the spiritual sky. So here in this purport, Prabhupada gives more details about what it is meant by rising to the spiritual sky. Let's go through the purport. The living being, by his desiring to lord it over the material world and declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord, and trying to lord over the material world. These are the 2 qualities that actually keeps us in the material world. We try to lord over the material nature, though we are not. We are thinking that we are lording over the material nature. This thought process is what actually keeps us in the material world, to give us an impression that we are actually trying to lord over the material world, which is actually not. And the second quality is declining to cooperate with the Supreme Lord. Context the sum total of the material world, namely the Mahat Tattva. And from the Mahat Tattva, his false identity with the material world, intelligence, mind, and sense is developed. So all these intelligence, mind, the false identity with the material world, intelligence, mind, and sense, all these things are developed because of the contact of the living entity with the Mahatattva. This covers his pure spiritual identity. So the pure spiritual identity is covered with the false identification with the material world the intelligence, the mind, and the senses. These things actually covers the spiritual identity. By the yogic process, when his pure identity is realized in self-realization, one has to revert to the original position by amalgamating the five gross elements and the subtle elements, mind, intelligence, into the Mahatattva again. So we leave these five gross elements, the subtle elements, mind and intelligence, we leave with Mahatattva and we go back to spiritual world. Thus, getting freed from the clutches of Mahatattva, he has to merge in the existence of the super soul only in quality again. In other words, he has to realize that qualitatively he is not different from the super soul, and thus he transcends the material sky by this pure identical intelligence, and thus becomes engaged in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the highest perfectional development of the spiritual identity, which was attained by Dhritarashtra. This is one thing that we have to very important that we have to note. The highest perfectional development of spiritual identity was attained by Dhritarashtra by the grace of Vidura and the Lord. So, what are the things that are involved in here? There is spiritual identity, there is individual living entity, and there is spiritual master. To attain the spiritual identity, the individual living entity has to get mercy from the spiritual master. So three things are involved, right? Spiritual identity, which is nothing but the Krishna Bhakti, Krishna Prema, and the living entity, Bhakta, and the spiritual master, Vidura here. So for Dhritarashtra is going to be the Bhakta here, Vidura is going to be the spiritual master, and the spiritual identity is nothing but the Krishna Prema. So these three parties are involved in this. And how did even a fallen soul like Dhritarashtra attained Krishna Prema? By the mercy of Vidura. Right? The Lord's mercy was bestowed upon him by his personal contact with Vidura. By Dhritarashtra's personal contact with Vidura, the Lord bestowed him bhakti. And when he was actually practicing the instructions of Vidura, the Lord helped him to attain the highest perfection stage. So there is a story, right? The sparrow story. There is prayasa and then there is daya. So the sparrow was actually flapping its, many times we heard this story. The sparrow was trying to flap its wings like anything to dry the entire ocean and get back its eggs. So finally what happened? Garuda had to come and give daya. So we might think in the material world, we might think that we are the doers. We might be thinking that we are lording over the material nature and we are the supplier of prasadam to Krishna. But it is not that. We are working so hard, despite of how much of our hard work that we do, unless Garuda comes, unless daya comes in the form of Garuda, from the Supreme Lord and from the spiritual master, we cannot progress in spiritual matters. So it is very, very important to first understand that it is the spiritual master who is a semi-transparent glass has to shed light on the face of the Supreme Lord so that we can see the Supreme Lord. Right? So spiritual master is transparent or semi-transparent glass between Bhakta, his devotee of Lord and Lord. So it is very important to understand the importance of spiritual master. So finally, Dhritarashtra understood the importance of spiritual master Vidura and he obeyed Vidura's orders. That is how Vidura actually has removed the curtain between Dhritarashtra and the Supreme Lord and requested Lord. That's how Lord shed his mercy, bestowed his mercy on Dhritarashtra. Despite of all his sinful reactions, he actually he bestowed his mercy upon Dhritarashtra. And finally, Dhritarashtra gets mukti. And this text is the last text in this 13th chapter. We'll end with this text. The translation says, having spoken thus, the great sage Narada, along with his Vena, ascended into outer space. Yudhishthira kept his instructions in his heart and so was able to get rid of all lamentation. So if you look at it, what happened to Yudhishthira? He was in lamentation, great lamentation out because of his compassion towards Dhritarashtra, and he was bewildered. But when spiritual master comes to us, all the bewilderment will go off. That is why it is very, very important. It is just not important to give respect. Along with that respect, it is very important to listen to the instructions from the spiritual master. There are many devotees who have really, really given their life to spiritual masters. There are many devotees like that. Right? So it is very important. In fact, when we take initiation, it means that the life is given to, or you are married to spiritual master, which means the life from that point onwards is not yours. It is spiritual masters. In fact, many devotees live on those lines. Right? So finally, Narada ascends to outer space to actually glorify the Supreme Lord along with his stringed instrument Tumbura. And Yudhishthira's lamentation is gone because he has given respect to spiritual master Narada and taken the instructions and kept them in his heart. So along with the spiritual instructions, along with the instructions of spiritual master resides the Supreme Personality of Godhead in the heart. The moment the Supreme Personality of Godhead resides in the heart, in our heart, what happens is the lamentation, the darkness completely goes off by the light. Yeah. So with this, Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purports for first canto, 13th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Dhritarashtra Quits Home. So I think I will stop here. I think I have taken 6 minutes more than the actual time. Sorry about that, Prabhuji. So here I think I'll end, unless we have any further discussions.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this class, Prabhuji. I think if there are any comments, questions, I think it's open.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Questions I will direct to Lilananda Prabhu. He's there. I think I can't. I'm definitely not a person to be able to handle them. So I'll guide questions to Lilananda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Wonderful class, Prabhuji. Thanks a lot, Prabhuji. You covered such a big subject, starting from Vichitra Virya all the way till end of Mahabharata and Dhritarashtra going to exile.
I didn't know that you are there since beginning. I would have been more careful while speaking.
Hare Krishna. No. So nicely done, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Prasad
Hare Krishna
Prabhu. Prasad Prabhu.
Yeah. Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam. Okay, very wonderful session. Very, very complex chapter, Prabhu. This is. You have covered very well, Prabhu. It's really amazing, Prabhu. Okay. So I have two questions, Prabhu. Not a points, Prabhu, if not questions. So finally, we are concluding that Duryodhana got Krishna Prema and reached Krishna Loka, Prabhu. Sorry, yeah, Dhritarashtra. Is the conclusion, Prabhu? Dhritarashtra?
Conclusion is Dhritarashtra got liberation because of the mercy of Vidura. That is the conclusion, Prabhuji.
So he reached Goloka.
Actually, there are three kinds of muktis, Prabhuji. So I think he attained Sayojya Mukti.
Okay, got it. Sayojya Mukti, got it.
Yeah, the moment we surrender, everything is taken by spiritual master, Prabhuji. As Lilananda Prabhu has been also, insisting so much on initiation. Initiation is a boon for us, which actually, the point when you get initiated, all your sins, whatever balance that is left, is taken by your spiritual master. Such a kind of pain that spiritual master takes, Prabhuji. So when Vidura came, he is holding responsibility for Dhritarashtra to get liberated. Lilananda Prabhu, please add to that, Prabhuji. I'm not having more knowledge on this.
Prabhuji, Hare Krishna. I have to read the chapter again. It's been some time, but one thing I can tell that Dhritarashtra was not given Krishna Prem. It was what kind of liberation? I have to read it again.
Sure.
It's been a while. Don't want to speculate.
Sure,
but definitely he did get the mercy of Vidura. He could get away from the attachment of his kingdom, of Dhritarashtra, the one who is attached to the Ashtra position. That much he left, and he even regretted for the indecisions he made during his life.
Okay.
And he also, Vidura nicely relieved him from further damage that he could do staying in the palace when Pandavas are ruling, with his envy, further damage that he could do. Vidura relieved him. Yes, they say that he achieved Kundalini or something, some yogic way he liberated himself. Liberation, mukti is different from bhakti. So definitely it was not bhakti, but he did go to upper planets, maybe, but we have to ask. He went to upper planets. That's what I remember. But again, I have to read it. But yes, that itself is a great achievement, right? I mean, somebody like Dhritarashtra going to a point where leaving his house, and that itself is
with a lot of envy and greed.
Yeah, just imagine, somebody from Microsoft or Amazon or Satyam Computers, going to forest. Not easy.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Another question I have, Prabhu. You said he's taking the remnants of Bhima. So, but and also Dharmaraj, Yudhishthira. Okay, that is what you mentioned, Prabhu.
Yeah.
But actually, Dharmaraj is giving Yudhishthira is giving the respect as his father's position. That is what he does. He comes every day and takes the blessings of both.
Yes.
His father and mother, kind of.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but if that is the case, then why this is happening, Prabhu? Why we are saying that, or why it is been mentioned that he's taking the remnants of Yudhishthira or Bhima?
So yeah, to understand this thing, we need to understand one thing, Prabhuji. Usually in a house, I mean, when I was a small child at my home, my father was the person to eat food in the beginning. After it is offered to the deities, my father was the first person to eat. In case my father delays coming home for lunch, there is a portion of it is taken separately before it is served for others. So usually it is a it's a customary to serve the head of the house. So here Yudhishthir Maharaj is the king of the kingdom. So in the entire kingdom, he is the first person to be served. That is how Yudhishthir Maharaj had, uh, you know, he cannot deny it. He can't say, I will eat only after Dhritarashtra, because he being the head, he had to eat the first portion.
Mm.
Because you have to follow rules when you are a king, right, Prabhu? He
I
has
understood. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it is not that he wants to do that. Okay?
Yes.
But that is, because the king is being served in that way.
Yes.
Got it, Prabhu. I understood now. Thank you very much, Prabhu. But
Thank you,
it's a
Prabhu.
very big chapter, Prabhu. But you have done it very well, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, one more thing is, sorry, just wanted to add. One more thing is the word remnants can be used in different contexts and different times.
Okay.
Right. So necessarily it doesn't have to literally the remnants of Yudhishthir.
Yeah.
It basically means whatever that he got after all the war, right? After all the ghastly war that he got, and he is trying to make a life out of it. After Yudhishthir never liked to do the war.
Yeah.
He tried his best not to, but still he did, and somehow they got back their kingdom. They got back a planet which is filled with widows. They got back a planet which is filled with so much turmoil. So somehow he started his kingdom, and here Vidura is trying to say that you already damaged them so much.
Yeah.
What kind of shame you have that whatever little they got, even that you want to sit and eat.
Yeah.
So in the context, the remnants is more like
Got it.
it's not like he ate Yudhishthir's remnants.
Got it.
Yeah, got it.
Actually, in Vedic system, the head of the house, yes, he is actually giving whatever is earning to others, but he eats at the end.
Okay.
That Prabhupada mentioned in the purport also.
Okay.
That he eats at the end. He in fact it says. In fact, he says, first the elderly people, women, children. Then he goes and shouts on the road that is there anybody else hungry?
Oh.
Right. After he make sure that the whole world is fed, then he. Who?
Oh, just to wake up Rashtra, he just tells you're eating the remnants like a dog, but it's not like
No, that context is
he was taken care very nicely and with the comfort.
No, you are not understood what I'm saying. I'm sorry, you're not understood what I'm saying. I'm not talking about Yudhishthira. I'm not talking about Yudhishthira and Dhritarashtra. I'm not talking about Yudhishthira and Dhritarashtra. Sorry, Anuradha is sitting here. She didn't understand what I'm saying. I'm talking about a Vedic family. Vedic culture. I'm not talking about Dhritarashtra and Yudhishthira. I am not talking about them. Why are you talking about last? Hear me. I'm not talking about them. Prabhuji, see, what I'm saying is, in Vedic culture, the householder should be eating at the end.
Okay.
Though he is the earner, because it doesn't keep him attached. He can control his senses. That is the whole point. Because if you earn and you want to eat first,
it'll all finish.
It'll all, it'll add more to his attachments like that. That is the word I'm saying, not about Yudhishthira. And coming back to Yudhishthira and Dhritarashtra, the word remnants is used in a different context.
Okay.
It is not that Yudhishthira ate and then his remnants went to the whole kingdom, and no, definitely not like that. In fact, you can see the example of Rantidev in 9th canto.
Yeah.
Where he, being the king, when he has to finally break the fast, he made sure that everybody had it.
Correct.
And then also when his share came, when he's literally going to die if he doesn't, it's still some outsider comes and takes even that. he's ready to give it.
Yeah.
So basically, Vidura is, subtly giving a peace of mind to Dhritarashtra. Siggundara niku inni annaya siggunda niku inta chesin tarvata inka vaalla inta kuchoni tintava, right? You made them bereft of so many things like that.
And also ఇది జరిగి that so many years అంటే I mean 12 years or 14 years I think Dhritarashtra has spent in that house.
Yeah.
Correct, no, Udayananda Prabhu?
Yes,
Yeah.
Guruji. Yeah.
Not immediately after that.
Yeah. See, I mean, this is the thing, Prabhuji. When we read, right, to understand, we need some guidance.
Yeah.
So whatever Lilananda Prabhu added, right, that absolutely makes sense. The Randi Devi's example.
As a greater purpose.
Yeah. So another was saying that, in that purport, Prabhupada says that whatever, we should not eat also. With our greed and attachment, we start eating that, in the wrong place, wrong time. That means people going to go to such a low level, right? And that is where, the word remnants is used, saying that you still want to sit and eat the remnants of your so-called enemies, I mean, like so-called you made them enemies for yourself. వాళ్ళది కూడా కూర్చొని తింటావా ఇంకా? I mean, Prabhuji, one thing is there, when we read Mahabharata, or when we talk about these people, they're great souls, I mean, we cannot compare them to our level of consciousness or today's people. We cannot even compare. Actually, Dhritarashtra also you can't compare to today's level. He's Dhritarashtra. I'm not saying he's great, but you cannot just judge Dhritarashtra like, today's person. Yeah. So they were great. They were great souls, and they did some great things. They did the worst thing also. Right? Nobody will do what Dhritarashtra did. Killing his 100 sons for a greed. Nobody will do even today.
Yeah.
Right? But people do. Even if you see the Ukraine-Russia war, there is one Dhritarashtra sitting there. He's ready to kill his entire country just to make his point. Right? Though there is no need for it. World is saying, don't do that. Don't get to that point, right?
Yeah.
Still, he will do it. So there are small little Dhritarashtras even today. Dhritarashtra is not gone. Recently, Sadhu Maharaj was here. I was talking to him, and he was saying, the whole world thinks that Putin is the villain. But if you go and ask the locals in Ukraine and locals in Russia, it's the other guy who has been attacking them and torturing them for a long, long time. And now, finally, Russia is reacting to it. So what we are shown, how it is portrayed in Kali Yuga, nothing can believe. It's all, there is a big agenda behind how we are made to understand what. So the Dhritarashtra tendency is there, but Vidura, Vidura is also there. Prabhupada who has come and is telling all of us, Yeah. But nice, Prabhuji. It's a highly philosophical class. The topic that you chose actually that came to
I
you.
was forced to choose, Prabhuji. After 12th, I had to do this. So.
And Prabhupada's purpose is very heavy in this chapter. Very heavy chapter.
Yeah. I kind of pick and choose certain highlighted text from there, because it's like 1 hour may not be sufficient. So
yeah. I think I should read it. It's been a long time I read that chapter. After your class, I'm feeling like reading it again. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for correcting. I think we'll end it here, Prabhuji. 9:05. It is 20 minutes over.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Praveen.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavat Padma Mataji. How
Dandavat.
are you, Mataji? Long time.